Hello, welcome to a new video in this revision series of the back exam. Today, we will focus on one of the possible types of guided writing exercises, which is using graphs to write a comparison contrast paragraph or a report. When you compare two things or more, you need to talk about the similarities and the differences between them. Let's start with the differences. There are some specific structures or expressions that we use while contrasting things. First, the use of the comparatives. For example, visiting museums is cheaper than going to the theater, or going to space is more expensive than traveling. So you notice here the use of the comparative form cheaper than, short adjective plus er plus than, and more expensive than, more plus long adjective plus than. If you want to emphasize a small difference, you just say visiting museums is a bit or slightly or a little cheaper than going to the theater. But if you'd like to emphasize a big difference, you say going to space is much or so much more expensive than traveling. Second, you can use the contrast linkers and expressions like, for example, but, or however, or yet, or in contrast, etc. For example, virtual schools have become a craze. Yet, or but, comma, traditional schools are still more popular. Other linkers used to express contrast are even though, although, and though. For example, even though virtual schools have become a craze, comma, traditional schools are still more popular. You can also use despite or in spite of. For example, despite becoming a craze, comma, virtual schools are still less popular than traditional schools. Finally, unlike can also be used. For example, unlike traditional schools, comma, virtual schools are still not very popular. Focus again and study the structure differences in these examples. Don't forget, if you want to emphasize a small difference, you say, for example, a bit more popular. And if you want to highlight a big difference, you say, for instance, much more popular. Finally, please watch out the highlighted linkers and punctuation. Differ from. For example, traditional education differs from the virtual one in many ways. Or you may use the expression be different from. For example, traditional schools are different from virtual ones in many ways. Another expression you are familiar with is there's a difference or there are differences between A and B. For example, there are many differences between virtual schools and traditional schools. Now, let's talk about similarities. Again, there are many expressions you should use in order to describe similarities. Here are some expressions and examples. First, you may use both and. For example, both Paris and London are big and attractive cities. Another expression is neither nor. For example, neither children nor adults appreciate visiting museums. You may also use not only but also. For example, not only London but also Paris are the most visited capitals in the world. As plus adjective plus as is another expression. For example, visiting London is as exciting as visiting Paris. Another expression is as well as. For example, adults as well as children enjoy going to the beach. You may also use as well or to at the end of the sentence. For example, children enjoy going to the beach, and their parents enjoy that as well. A last expression I suggest is equally or similarly. For example, for children, visiting museums and going to galleries are equally boring. Finally, I would like to tell you that all the linkers and expressions seen in this part of the presentation can be adapted to different types of activities, such as studying statistics presented in diagrams, like in the following examples: bar graphs, or line graphs, or pie charts, or Venn diagrams. Now, let's do some practice with a Venn diagram. In this task, you are asked to write a short paragraph in which you compare and contrast life in the city and life in the countryside. Okay, let's have a look at this Venn diagram. Polluted air in the city. Less polluted air in the village. Careless people in the city. Strong sense of community in the village. But in both, we have a growing housing crisis and increasing joblessness rates. As you can see, you have differences and a couple of similarities. The differences are organized in such a way that each idea in city life counters another in country life. Always start your paragraph with a topic sentence or an introductory sentence where you present what you will write about. And finish the same paragraph with a concluding sentence where you either wrap the whole thing up or draw a conclusion. Of course, don't forget to use concluding expressions like as a conclusion, to conclude, or to sum up, etc. Also, you have to avoid repetition by using words that have nearly the same meaning as the ones you already used. For example, use contrasts instead of differences, or common points instead of similarities, or urban area instead of city or town, or rural area instead of countryside or village, etc. Now, if you wish, you can write your own paragraph after watching the video. But now, let's do this task to get a sample paragraph. The task is to fill in the blanks with 8 words or expressions from the box below. So let's start reading the paragraph. Urban and rural lives are not only different, but also blank in some ways. In fact, the air in the city is blank polluted than that in the countryside. Also, neighbors in the city seem to be so careless. Blank. Neighbors in the countryside have a blank sense of community and are very, very helpful. Along with the blank, both rural and urban areas have a couple of similarities. First, city dwellers, blank, villagers witness a growing housing crisis. Second, the joblessness rate is increasing in blank areas. Blank, we can say that many people decide to move to the country in order to enjoy a better health and to have better relations. Now, the list of words and expressions is in contrast, as well as similar, to conclude, which is capitalized in fact, stronger, different, both, unlike, much more, and differences. So think about this. Did you get the right answers? Now here are the answers. First word, similar. Second, much more. Then, in contrast. Notice that it is capitalized because it is preceded by a full stop. Stronger. Differences, as well as both. To conclude, and again we have a capitalization because it's at the beginning of the sentence. So here you got a sample paragraph in which you compare and you contrast life in the city and life in the countryside. I'm hopeful it's fruitful for you. Now that we've finished with the Venn diagram, let's continue the second part of the presentation with a graph interpretation. And here's an example. After reading the instruction, the first question that comes to mind is, what are you going to write? If the answer is a paragraph, then it is not correct. You are asked to write a 5-line report. But what's a report? And how do we write it? In our case, the report is a short and clear description of the information that has already been provided in the graph. First of all, you should provide a title to your report. If you can't make your mind about it quickly, leave it till the end. But don't forget it. Then, you should start writing by referring to the source of information, which is the graph here, including the place and the dates. For example, according to the graph that illustrates virtual school enrollment in the USA from 2004 to 2012, so notice that the introduction includes the source of information, which is the graph, the place, which is the USA, and the dates that are presented in the instruction and in the graph as well. Then, in the description, you have to analyze the statistics first, and then you have to mention the reasons. In general, in statistics, numbers increase or rise or go up or soar or rocket, or they fall, decrease, or drop. In our task, the numbers are increasing steadily, from 50,000 students in 2004 to 150,000 in 2008 to 250,000 in 2012. The conclusion we can draw here is that every 4 years, the number rose by 100,000. In this report, you don't need to repeat the numbers and the years again. Your writing will be redundant. Remember, you've already stated that in the introductory sentence. So, we continue our writing by saying, we notice that the number of students who enrolled in these schools increased by 100,000 students every 4 years. Now, let's state the reasons. If we study the reasons again, we notice that the opportunity offered by virtual schools to work and learn at the same time and to learn at one's own pace is called flexibility. And this is a keyword that may be included in the report. So we write, this rise is mainly due to the flexibility offered to them. In fact, virtual students don't only have the opportunity to study and work at the same time to make ends meet, but also to learn at their own pace. And this explains why virtual schools have become more and more popular. The last sentence we added here could be considered as a brief conclusion that we deduced from the graph. Now, what do you think? Is that all? Of course not. You still have to decide about the title if you haven't done that yet. You are free to choose the form of the title. It could be in the affirmative form or in the interrogative form. And here are 2 examples. Either you write, American virtual schools are booming, or has virtual education in the USA become a craze? Be careful how to spell words in the title, please. Notice that all the words in the title have to be capitalized. Now here's the sample report. American virtual schools are booming, or has virtual school education in the USA become a craze? According to the graph that illustrates virtual school enrollment in the USA from 2004 to 2012, we notice that the number of students who enrolled in these schools increased by 100,000 students every 4 years. This rise is mainly due to the flexibility offered to them. In fact, virtual school students not only have the opportunity to study and work at the same time to make ends meet, but also to learn at their own pace. And this explains why virtual schools have become more and more popular. Now your report is ready. You only have to proofread it or review it to check any possible spelling or grammar or punctuation mistakes. I hope this presentation is of great help to you to make you understand one way of how to compare and contrast things and how to study a graph. Thank you for watching and good luck!